books in ebook form circulate in a way that is very weird and very different. I mean, one of the things that you lose when you make the shift to ebooks is you lose your library. You lose a room in your house which contains all the books that you've ever read. And books do this wonderful thing. Another thing the codex does that we forget about: when you close an ebook and when you close a codex and place it on a shelf, it continues to transmit to you in this funny way. You pass by it all the time. It's like a Wi-Fi hotspot. It puts up its hand and says, you read me once. All the things that are in me are now in you. And it reminds you of that. And in this funny way, you have this room full of books that you've read. You have this kind of physical map, almost, of your preoccupations, both past and present. And part of my library is my father's library. He left a lot of books to me, and now that's merged into my own library. It's this wonderful little intellectual history of yourself and your family that you have when you've spent a lifetime reading codices. When you spend a lifetime reading ebooks, you have a piece of plastic, which will be obsolete in 2 years. It's not the same thing. It is demonstrably one person's opinion. However, I think it takes into account some things that a lot of people forget. We're very used to the codex. We're not aware, I think, of a lot of the functions that it performs for us. As a result, we can give them up very easily. But I think we'll miss them once they're gone. How you can discard, 2,000 years of book art as vanity is bizarre to me. And if you say goodbye to publishers, what you are saying hello to is the marketplace. That will now be your middleman. That will be the way that you shape your tastes. The star ratings on Amazon. The market for ebooks is a frictionless marketplace. Things just zip up and down it very easily, much the way, for example, videos do on YouTube. So it's possible that it's possible to derive a great deal of pleasure from monkey riding backwards on a pig. However, it ain't no, Apocalypse Now or whatever. So you have to keep in mind that the market is a very important force in driving culture, but it needs to be balanced, and you lose that balance when you give up publishers, and instead you give yourself over to a very strange world that maybe doesn't value the things that you value in quite the way that you expect it to. Things about the conversations about e-readers is that people don't tend to know a great deal about the history of the book, and what they do know is Gutenberg, which I think is not actually the most important precedent for understanding the kind of transition that we're going through from print books to ebooks. What we are doing is going through a format change, an actual radical change in the way books are physically structured and experienced. And that hasn't happened for a long time. It hasn't happened for 2,000 years, since the invention of what we in the technical literary world call the codex, which is simply the name for a book as we know it. In the classical world, people read scrolls, so those things that you see in Asterix comics, and eventually someone had a great idea, which was to bind a bunch of pages together and then read it like a book. That idea did not take off until the early Christians got a hold of it, and they used it as a way to disseminate the Bible, and the codex has been the standard ever since. And I think what people forget when they talk about moving books from codices to e-readers is that the novel, at least, the novel as we know it, it evolved on the codex. It is structured and built to be read on a codex. The way we read a novel, the rhythm of it, the way we experience of it, and the way that the language asks us to experience it, consists of this wonderfully rich series of rereadings, of skimmings, of comparing passages, of moving backwards and forwards. The reader has a lot of control over the way they experience a novel, which is something very unique. You don't see it in movies or in music. We wander through novels in this wonderfully generative, creative way. And the experience of an ebook is very different. And you lose a lot of that. You lose a lot of that wonderful dynamic between reader and novel, because novels evolved on codices. you can think of the codex as the hardware to which novels as software are native. They are optimized for the codex. And when you try to move them to the ebook, you're doing something very radical and something that novels were really not written for. You lose a lot of that richness.
Are there new forms that will come out from authors who know that the ebook is the dominant mode?
Well, I think it's quite possible. I think novels, if they truly become rooted in ebooks, and there's every sign that they are going to do so, I mean, the transition is happening very fast, they will change. The vessel into which you pour content like a novel changes that content. And writers will find a way to create powerful experiences on the ebook, just as they found ways to create powerful experiences on the scroll before we had the codex. There was great literature before there was the codex, but they weren't novels, not in the modern sense. And whatever we have on ebooks, they won't be novels in the way that we know them now. They'll be a little bit different. I imagine them as being far more linear. You cannot navigate an ebook very well, which is an odd thing about them. You cannot flip back and forth. You can't compare narratives. That clicking action that you perform, your finger tends to take over and sort of accelerate. So you go, there's a straight line through an ebook. Novels, you wander around and the arrow points generally one way in an ebook. And people will write for that. And I think what they'll do is write probably much plottier novels with much simpler language, the kind of language that you don't want to go over and over and over again to extract its second and third and fourth kind of resonances. It's a different kind of writing, and who's to say it's worse or better? But if we're going to move from the codex to the ebook, we should know what we're doing.
Right.
And we should know what we're giving up.
And it's inevitable.
No, it's not inevitable at all.
No.
We have the power. We, as readers, can choose to read however we want to. There's a rush into ebooks, definitely. But I think an equilibrium will be reached, and it'll be interesting to see where that falls. It'll also be interesting to see whether the publishing industry can evolve to accommodate the ebook. Ebooks are weird animals. They're different from books. People are not willing to pay as much for an ebook as they are for a print book because they don't feel like they're worth as much. They are these ghostly virtual presences that are gone as soon as you turn the machine off. Can you pay $24.95 for one of those? Can you charge that much? Well, we can't so far. And it's not clear that publishers can afford to do what they do, to pay the salaries of editors and copy editors and designers and everything else, while selling ebooks as opposed to print books. There just ain't enough money in it.